Okay. So again, we are here today to talk about valuable volunteers, cultivating and stewarding volunteer support at the local level. My name is Melissa DeSorda, and I'm the Volunteer Services and Community Philanthropy Manager here at the Foodbank. And by the way, if anyone has questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. We have staff here monitoring that for us, and they will bring them up as they come along, or feel free to take yourself off mute. And if you're comfortable with that, chime in, don't hesitate. So at the end of today's session, we're hoping that you'll be able to answer these 3 questions. What are the 4 steps of the donor cycle? How do they apply to your volunteers? And how can you apply this model to your organization? And we're going to accomplish this through 3 ways. We're going to do some knowledge sharing. So I'm going to share my knowledge with you. You're going to have some independent planning time where you'll do some self-reflection and planning for your own organization. And we'll actually also have some collective insight exchanges where you'll be talking with your colleagues. To add a little framework to what we're going to be talking about today, when we think about volunteers and the information that I'm going to be sharing with you, I'm going to be looking at it and presenting information at the 30,000-foot level, really high up concepts. And then you're going to actually be drilling that information down and applying it at that 3-foot level. Literally, you're all there, the boots on the ground, feeding families, helping households. And so it's so important to acknowledge that the local connections are where you're going to be able to get the local investments. So I'm going to share 30,000 foot, and you're all going to be thinking about it at the 3-foot level. At the Vermont Food Bank, we actually define philanthropy, which is where volunteer services sit in our organization, as the art of facilitating love of the community. When a volunteer is sharing their really limited amount of time with us, it's a way in which we're facilitating their love of the community. And with volunteers sitting in philanthropy, oftentimes people think about philanthropy in the concept of donors. And the same relationship cycle or stewardship cycle for volunteers can apply to donors, applies to volunteers as well. So those 4 basic steps are identification, cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship. And we're going to do some work in each one of those areas today. It's really important when you think about identification that before you think about the who, which I think for most of us is where our gut goes to, is like, okay, identification is who. Who is going to fill those gaps? Who can I get to come into my food shelf to help? Who? Is that you actually think about the what. What is it that you need help with in your organization? Do you need help setting up a website, filing, stocking shelves, greeting program participants, picking up fresh rescue, cooking meals, serving meals? There's so many different things in which each one of your organizations needs assistance with that volunteers could potentially help fill that gap. And not every organization is going to have the same gap. When you think about the what, you not only want to think about the actual task that you need, but about the days and times in which you need that support. Is there any flexibility to that schedule? It could be that if you need them to help you build your website, is that something that they can do from their home in their own, their own schedule after hours? Is it that your fresh rescue day is only Tuesdays and that you need them to be there for noon? So thinking about, when you think about the what, thinking about the tangible what is the task? What is the time and day in which you need? And then what resources also is the volunteer going to need to be able to accomplish those tasks? If they're helping you with your website, do you have a computer that they can use, or is the expectation that they will be using their own computer? If they are picking up your fresh rescue or they're delivering meals, does your insurance require that they use your organization's vehicle, or do you need them to use their own? There are so many ways in which volunteers can support your efforts, but before you can even get to the who might fill that gap, you need to make sure you're understanding the what. Any questions before we go into our first activity? No, okay. So we're going to take 2 to 3 minutes, and each one of you is going to start brainstorming around what it is that your organization needs that a volunteer can help support you with. You are welcome to turn off your computer at this time. We're not going into breakouts yet. We'll do that in a little bit. And I'm just going to play a little background music while you brainstorm. Okay, well, welcome back. I'm curious, I can't hear the music on your end, so I did try and turn it down. So hopefully it did get a little bit quieter for everybody. Or you just really thought I was rocking over here, which is okay too. Okay. So the next piece to identification is actually the who. So at this stage in the game, when you're thinking about the who, is you want to cast a really wide net. This list should always be dynamic and ever changing. I feel like my high school English teacher would be so proud of me because I remembered what static and dynamic characters were. The dynamic is ever changing. So you want your potential pool of volunteers to always be dynamic. So in this next step, when we talk about, when you do your brainstorming, you're going to want to cast that really wide net and list anyone and everyone within your community, and your community you can define however you want as to who potentially could be a volunteer. The other piece, when you're thinking about this ever-changing dynamic list of volunteer pool, is that you don't make assumptions. So your organization may hypothetically serve seniors, and this volunteer pool may hypothetically only serve youth. And so you may feel like it's not the best fit, and you may go, I'm not going to go and cultivate that relationship because our missions don't align. At this stage in the game, don't make any assumptions. Thinking about how your missions align or don't align, you're going to want to really invest some time in doing some research into what that organization is about, and how is it that your organizations and your missions of your organizations do actually in fact overlap. And we're going to talk about an example here in a second. But I wanted to point out in this picture that you see on the screen is that there, in this one picture, and there are a few hands off to the side, but it still captures them all. There are volunteers from a local high school, a local business, a healthcare facility, and the local general community as well, all in this one picture. And those relationships were developed at different times and at different paces along the way. Yet here they are all together. So when you're thinking about that research that you are going to do on your list of potential volunteer, you need to think about how your mission statement overlaps or aligns with theirs. Here on the white on the left, you'll see that this is actually from a statewide organization here in Vermont. They have hundreds, if not thousands, of volunteers that go border to border and really do invest in their local communities. And the piece I want to draw attention to is that their bullet points promote peace, fight disease, provide clean water, sanitation, and hygiene, save mothers and children, support education, grow local economies, and support the environment. Nowhere does it ever talk about food per se. It doesn't mean that their mission doesn't somehow connect with what you're accomplishing in your community. You could start thinking about how is it that how many children in female identifying households does your organization support? Connect with your local school to learn about the correlation between hunger and learning so that when you do have these conversations with an organization like this, you have all of that information readily available to start sharing with them. Do you partner with any local farms or businesses? I know the Foodbank has an amazing program called Vermonters Feeding Vermonters, and many of our network partners have access to that program. And this is a way in which you can be talking about how your work overlaps with supporting local economies. Our gleaning program, I mean, those are all Vermont farmers. If you're accessing any of our gleaned produce, that's another way in which you can connect and have an overlap. And this is just one example. And what I'm trying to illustrate here is that, like, on the left, it doesn't look like there's any overlap. And then when you start to think about the work that you do is so much broader than just putting food on the table. Any questions? So this next part, and then after this, we're going to go into a breakout. But for this next piece, we're going to have each of you take 2 to 3 minutes again to brainstorm potential pools of volunteers in your own community. And again, that community can be whatever it is that you define it as, and just start brain dumping a whole list. You don't have to be specific, but here, feel free to take these minutes. Again, you can turn your computer off and I will play some quiet. Okay, to bring everybody back. So the next piece is we're going to get you guys all into small rooms, breakout rooms. And during this time, we're going to give you 10 minutes. And in your small groups, take that time to share your what it is that you need volunteer support with. And ideally at least one, but feel free to share more of the who. that you'll be connecting with after this session. Also think about, were there any aha moments that you wanted to share with your group? Is there anything, a specific challenge that you were hoping to have a thought partner with related to identification? And when we come back, we'll have some share outs.
Welcome back. It's so neat to be on this end of the breakout rooms and watch the microphones kind of popping. So we couldn't hear anything that was going on, but we could see the microphones kind of going live, which is very cool.
So is everybody back? Like, I can't tell if everybody's back or not.
Yeah. So it was, didn't seem to be enough time, although I didn't get in for a few minutes. I wasn't put in because only 2 people got to speak. So if we're going to be working on, some of the challenges and so forth, then it would be nice to hear the challenges from everybody and any ideas.
If we have extra time for the next breakout meetings, we can make it longer, see how we do. Is there any other insights into what you learned from each other, or anything you want to share about your own what and who?
So I agree with Nancy, like we were just getting into. So Nancy, I would like to catch up and hear what you had to say. What was starting to just kind of, and again, we didn't have much of it. We didn't get to everybody, but there's a different perspective from completely volunteer network partners and people that have paid staff, I think, or like our organization, like having somebody paid to round up the troops versus completely volunteer, that there is a different dynamic in those 2 cases. I didn't say that well, but.
Yeah, one idea we heard was to pay, can you hear me? Was to pay for cleaning staff. Because that's not something that most volunteers A, want to do, or B, want to do well. So.
Any last one before we move on?
This particular, another idea in our group, not only appealing to schools or colleges, but specific groups within the schools, like National Honor Society, or groups like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts groups, PTAs, so not just, students.
Retired.
Yeah. What?
Old age and more tired people.
So the next step, oh, go ahead, Amy.
I just wanted to say that we talked a little bit about it in our group, but identifying groups that have food access issues, and then looking for other groups in your community that work with them. Like, we know that in our community, a lot of folks that are LGBTQ have a difficult time with food access because a lot of them get nervous about going to churches that are in remote places, or so inviting the local Pride Center to come in and volunteer with us, like, kind of opens people's ideas up. So maybe folks that are like, refugees and immigrants, or, folks that need food access, because a lot of volunteers are volunteering with the benefit of getting more access to food. So it's kind of helpful, like identifying who might need food in your community and then asking them if they want to help out.
Great idea. Okay, so the next 2 steps we're actually going to kind of talk about together, and that is cultivation and solicitation. And I group them together because you never know at what moment that ask might actually be the perfect moment to pop the question. Okay, so I have way too many things going on this screen at one time. So developing relationships within your community is not only vital to connecting people with your resource, like what Amy was talking about, but also sharing the positive impact that you're having in your community. And that can help with donors and all sorts of other things as well, but also with recruiting volunteers. So don't hesitate. And this is where I think some organizations also struggle, is like bragging about yourself. It's totally okay to brag about the amazing work that you're all doing, because it is truly awesome. So when you're thinking about that cultivation process, you want to make sure when you're spreading the word that you're talking about the positive impact that you're having, connecting with their mission. And that loops back to that, the research that we talked about earlier, making sure that you identify the gap in the need. So you could say, you know, we're doing all of this great work, but if we had someone to build our website, we could do X, Y, and Z more. If we had another volunteer who could pick up fresh rescue for us, we could expand the amount of food that we have available in our pantry. And when you do that cultivation and then that solicitation piece, which is the invitation, you want to do it in a couple of different ways, or I suggest you do it in a couple of different ways. You could ask them or invite them to follow up. Like, I would be happy to come back and talk at the Rotary next month or next quarter. I would be happy to have you come and visit. Why don't you bring the Rotary Club out for a site visit to our distribution or our pantry, or invite them just to volunteer as a one-off first, like come and get their feet wet. It's important to know that cultivation and the solicitation, the ask, the invitation can look very different, not just for each organization, but for each relationship that you're developing. I can't tell you the number of times that I literally have been in my local grocery store and have had like those side grocery cart conversations with my neighbors, or even with employees of the grocery store, and they end up really coming to fruition into either a bigger picture conversation or into, you know, an actual volunteer that I'm now stewarding through that relationship. So it can look like so many things, even more than these 4 pictures on the screen. One piece I want to point out when you think about the gap and the need, I'm sure most of us in the room at some point in our life have taken the Red Cross first aid training. And I always think of this as a really great example. The first thing they tell you to do in a medical emergency is identify one person to call 911. Because if everybody thinks someone's going to go do it, nobody goes and does it. So the first thing you do in a medical emergency is identify, Bob, go call 911. You, go call 911. So in this example, thinking about it in relation to volunteers and identifying the gap, is that it's so important to then say, there is this gap and we need you. We need you to come do this. We need your help. So it's so important to make sure that you're identifying that there's a gap and you're telling them that you need them. I spent almost 7 years in medical quality improvement. And one of the things that they always tell you is that you never know unless you try. And in this context, I say you never know unless you ask. And the worst that they're going to say is no. And then you're not any worse off. And they go to the bottom of your cultivation. But yeah, it's putting yourself out there can be risky, but it's definitely worth the investment. So I wish I could say it's as simple as you had me at hello from Jerry Maguire, but it's really not. Developing relationships takes time and effort, just like it does in our personal lives. It takes the same amount of time and effort and investment in cultivating and stewarding and volunteers as well. So really be ready to make an investment and be patient with yourself as well. The amount of pressure that you're going to put on and off that gas pedal as you're cultivating that relationship is not only driven by your own needs on your end from your organization, but really on the readiness of the person that you're cultivating. Okay, so be ready to kind of let them take the lead on when they're ready to move that conversation forward and when they're like, I need a moment. We had, and I know there's some people in the room, so this may sound very familiar. Our Veggie Van Gogh program really took a huge shift in our distribution model when the pandemic hit, and we had partners in the healthcare field and in the education field. And of all of the things that closed during the pandemic, those were two of the hardest hit institutions, and all of them needed to take a step back. Some of them have been able to come back on board, and some of them haven't been able to, and they just acknowledge like we're not going to be able to re-engage in this program in the same way. And so over the last 3 years, we have been in one community that had 2 Veggie Bingo distributions a month, really letting, pressing on the gas and letting off the gas, and even at times really pulling the e-brake at moments too, in cultivating relationships within that community to be able to steward new site sponsors for those 2 programs. And for those that are in the room that have stepped up, I'm thinking of certain ones. Thank you so much. We're so excited. So again, just be patient. I'm not saying it's going to take 3 years, but really let them take the lead. And so in this next planning time, I'm going to have each of you take 2 minutes to just take one person off of your who list and brainstorm ways in which you can share your message with them. Again, thinking back as to, what is it that you're doing? How does your missions overlap? If you do know what their mission is, because you haven't done that research yet. And what your gap is, like your elevator pitch in a sense. So take 2 minutes. I'm going to play the quiet music, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about stewardship. You are all my first group with like playing music, and I totally saw some people like grooving with it. And I heard it was still loud, and I totally turned it down all the way. So I have no idea if you could hear music or not. So why doesn't everybody come back? And we're going to talk about stewardship. When I think of stewardship, I think of it as the cinch pin. It's what really pulls it all together. So Merriam-Webster defines stewardship as the careful and responsible management of something entrusted to one's care. When we think about volunteers, they're entrusting us with their time, their safety, their emotional well-being. They're really putting a lot of trust in us. And so now that you have them, you've gotten them to that yes. How do you keep them? And although I've contemplated this, I haven't done it. Duct tape is not the answer. So in my time as a volunteer, in my time out in the field working with volunteers for 2 years, and now that I get to rock it with volunteers all across the state, there are really 4 areas in which they've shared with us in ways in which they feel are the critical points in which play into the stewardship of their relationship with us. And that is volunteers feel that they need to be informed and resourced. They need to have a purpose. They need to be heard. And this one's my favorite. They need to be appreciated. I have so much fun with that one. When we think about being informed and resourced, they want and need to be resourced to be successful. They don't want to come there just because like they're there and do a bad job and never want to come back again. Like they're there for a reason. Orientation and onboarding are the critical foundation points for orienting and onboarding and introducing them into your organization. They're not the same thing. When I think of orientation, I think of here's where the bathroom is. This is where you park. This is where you can hang your coat. Onboarding is really that moment or moments, that time in which you spend with the volunteer, introducing to them, exposing them to your organization's culture, expectation, your purpose and mission, your policies, all of those pieces. And if you lay that foundation work, it'll then help you with these other things along the way. So orientation and onboarding are truly your foundational points that you need to be investing in. They want transparent and timely communications. So they want to know like, oh, if you don't need them to go pick up the fresh rescue, they would like to know in a timely fashion. Many volunteers actually truly do build their lives around these moments where they're giving their time to you. And so they want to be able to know in as advance notice as possible if something's needed or not needed or shifting for them. I put in quotations tools to complete the task, because tools are not just the tangible things. Like, yes, it is absolutely the box cutter to open the boxes, the computer to build the website, the vehicle to go deliver the meals, whatever it is those tangible things are, but it is also information. It may be they need the information to know how many of a certain item a family's eligible to pick up for within the food shelf that day. They may need to know the contact information for the person at the store that they're picking up the fresh rescue from. They need not only the tangible tools, but they need the information that's going to help set them up for success. This is a tricky one. Feedback. They may be volunteers, but customers are not always right. Volunteers are not always right. And it is important for them to be able to have access to feedback, just like a colleague would. So feedback is another piece that they actually have shared with us that they want more of. They want to know when something's going good, and they want to know when they've totally missed the mark on something. Purpose. Equally of a challenge of having too few volunteers is not having enough, or wait, I did that wrong. Having too few volunteers and having too many volunteers. Like they're both equally of a challenge. Volunteers, when they come, they want to be there. They want to be of service, and they want to feel like the time that they're giving, that they're sharing with you, was for a reason. So when they feel like they have a purpose, that they're not standing around, proverbially twiddling their thumbs, that they will come back. If they are feeling valued, if they're feeling like they have a purpose, they're more likely to return. So as you're building your foundation with understanding what it is you need support with, it really plays into making sure that your purpose, that the volunteers, the purpose that they're there for, you're setting them up for success. Third, volunteers offer a unique perspective into the work that you do. They will have a different relationship with whether it's a program participant, with a colleague, with the community partner they're out picking up the fresh rescue to, because they're not the organization in a sense. They may be doing a different task than what you're familiar with. And so they have this insight into the world that we're working in that we may not see. So make sure that you're listening and you're learning from them. That doesn't mean that you have to then accept every piece of advice that they give you, but making sure that they feel heard. I hear you. And then appreciation, that's the one that I love so much. April's Volunteer Appreciation Month, and so I clearly am getting way too excited already. When we're appreciated, even in our personal lives, we are happier, healthier, and more inclined to give. Give more to our relationships, give more to work, give more to that volunteer opportunity. We are just more inclined to give more of ourselves. Gratitude is the most powerful tool in your toolbox, in your stewardship cycle that you have. And I encourage you to use it often and with robust exhilaration. It is amazing. It doesn't have to just be, here's that volunteer t-shirt that is, logoed with our, our branding. It can be, thank you so much for coming in today. Thank you so much. I haven't been able to clean that back corner of the storage room in so long, and we have our audit coming up. Thank you. Birthday. Oh my gosh, your birthday's next week. Have a great birthday. Sending a birthday card. Getting to know your volunteers is really critical in helping them feel like they are appreciated. Hey, your son's graduating from college this year. What are his plans for after? Getting to know them and really making them feel like they're an individual is so powerful. I know this sounds so silly as we're like in this virtual meeting, but there is a powerful tool. It comes on a 3x5 card. You put a little stamp on it. You put it in the mail. It's called a postcard. Handwritten notes are old school, and I love them. And they are so appreciated on the volunteer end, because you took that moment not to sit at your computer for 2 minutes and shoot them off an email. Like, you literally took the time to handwrite a card, go to the post office, send it in the mail. Like, you took initiative and effort and made them feel acknowledged. So I highly recommend handwritten note cards whenever you can, because they are awesome. So as our last planning time, and I know we only have just a few minutes left, take 3 minutes to brainstorm in at least one of those 4 areas, ways in which you can improve your stewardship of volunteers. And if people have time to stay longer, I totally can stay.
Melissa,
I wonder, oh, go ahead,
you,
Amy.
I'm sorry. Could you type or say those 4 methods of celebrating volunteers, or putting them in the chat maybe?
I do see too a question for if anybody has a volunteer guidebook. And I'm wondering, Melissa, if you might have a resource for that, or if there's anybody here in this space. We'll definitely be sending this slide deck, as well as the recording will be available. And Melissa, guidebook or handbook? I know they kind of can be 2 different things, eh?
I was curious if we're looking for an outward facing document or an inward facing document, or both. I do have some links. The Vermont Foodbank is also in a place of reflection and growing. Our program drastically changed with COVID, so we actually don't have a handbook for our volunteers. It's something that we're working on right now. So I have some resources that I can share with you from other organizations that have been kind enough to share their resources with me. Amy, that's a great idea. Amy just put in the chat. It's unfortunately we ran out of time. I talked too much. She's encouraging you to try and get contact information for someone that you were connecting with in your first breakout session. And she says she's happy to be of more help if needed, and I'm happy to be here as well. I can stay on longer, and I'm also available. I can put my contact information here at the end. Next slide. And this will be included in the slide deck as well. I can set up some one-on-one time with sites if you want to talk, you know, the idiosyncrasies of your particular program. So don't hesitate to reach out.
And the Randolph area food shelf and the Johnson food shelf both offered to share their handbooks as well.
So would it be possible, this is Nancy, to have the person from Johnson send a digital copy to Melissa, and then Melissa, for you to share that and share resources with all of us in an email?
Yeah, I can reach out.
Guidebooks.
Yeah, I'll reach out. Diane, I see your message. I can reach out to Diane, and I'm not quite sure. I'll have to look back up. Oh, Rachel, and get the manual handbooks that they have, and we'll put that all right in the same email.
Thank you. Thanks for today.
Thank
Take care.
Yes, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So for those of you are staying, I think we'll skip over, just because in lieu of time, we'll skip over we're going to skip over the breakout, and then things that I want to make sure that I drill home to all of you is that appropriately stewarded volunteers can provide leads on additional volunteers that then the cycle begins again. So that cycle again is identification, cultivation, stewardship, or solicitation and stewardship. And then it's more questions.
Yeah, I'm feeling like with the time, I already am like, wow, it would be so great to have just like a virtual space for folks to share one-on-one with each other, because it sounds like there was a desire for that. So I wonder if that could be part of our follow-up as well. I don't know for the folks who are still on how that resonates, but an hour, oh boy, now you see it, now you don't.
Yeah, for those of you that are still on, how does that sit with you? The idea of maybe, you know, just having like just an open time virtually where the topic of conversation is all things volunteers and maybe some peer learning opportunities, and just hearing from others what challenges are and how what they're trying to address those challenges and that sort of thing.
That would be nice.
I think it might be nice, Melissa, if we put that in an evaluation that we could send out and maybe try to capture some days and days of the week or times of days that would be good for a drop-in opportunity.
Absolutely include that in the evaluation. So there will be an evaluation that comes out with all of these resources as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here. Oh yeah, go ahead, Kathy.
I'm just thinking somewhere else, I also got this casting a wider net thing, which is good. But I mean, I live in a town next door to where the meal site is. I don't know what businesses there are that well, and where I'm serving, as far as appealing to businesses. We've appealed in terms of money, but not particularly time, volunteers. So I don't know what I'm saying.
Yeah, like where really is your community of folks who could express their love for Danville and its neighbors by volunteering.
Also,
yeah.
I thought about the honor society in the schools, but the problem there is we're open from like, you know, the school days, 8 to 2, let's say. So that's right when the school day is. So unless they have a particular program they can escape to somewhere else to do an on-site something, yeah, that's kind of not going to work, I guess.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I have
Yeah.
to think about it. some of these ideas.
And Kathy, I keep thinking, and I'd have to really like think more on this, but particularly some of our smaller towns, like really taking this to the town, because it is a community service, having town support, even some town financial support, space, resources, somebody that does bookkeeping that wants to help out, like actually like incorporating some of these things at a town community level and approach it as a community.
That's a good idea. The town already gives us money, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But really then like addressing it that way, saying this is what we really need. And maybe some folks that work alternate shifts, so that if you need a younger volunteer list, maybe there's folks that work at night that might have time in the morning, maybe off shifts, maybe knowing that your commitment doesn't have to be a full-time job, but just kind of looking for some of those gaps. But I think, and the more I think about it, I think towns really incorporating the work being done by volunteers. And all I also kept thinking, and you're our last person on, so so you're getting my full attention. But the appreciating volunteers is so important, and when you're at the top of the volunteers, when you're the volunteer running it, to make sure that you're feeling appreciated as well. That's a big lift, to be the person organizing everybody else as well. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I love that idea, Meg, and I love that appreciation for Kathy too and what they're doing in Danville is amazing. And I'm thinking town meeting is coming up and how powerful it could be to have a table at town meeting and taking some time to think about the what and really bringing that very intentional list of needs to town meeting and expressing and bragging about the good work you're doing there and trying to really inspire people at town meeting to join in and be an integral part of what you're doing. Yeah.
Great idea.
Yeah. Because some commitments are small, like limited. Maybe you need somebody to fill out a website or get information built or do a few grant applications or whatever it might be, that it's not necessarily the hands-on organizing and delivering of the food. Maybe it's organizing the volunteers, somebody that's good at that.
We have started a birthday card program. So we have one person that's at home mostly, but she sends out birthday cards a few days ahead of someone's birthday on our roster. And that includes the volunteers.
That's awesome.
We have, every month we're starting celebrating honoring all the birthdays of that month. So little birthday cupcakes. Everybody gets a birthday cupcake.
Oh, wonderful.
In addition to the regular dessert. So,
wonderful.
Yeah.
Kathy, the other thing to think of is you mentioned there aren't a lot of businesses but it may be that they live in your community, but they work elsewhere. So bringing it up at town meeting is a great idea because you're connecting with your community that way. The other entities I think of are banks. Everybody's got it, unless they're stuffing their mattress somewhere. I think they've got
Yeah, we have one right around the corner from us, and they also give us money.
Yeah.
Too.
Banks have really been stepping up in the last, at least what I've seen in the last 6 months or so with us. So they are great entities to reach out to. Think about,
So another group or somewhere else, I got something about going to or asking to be on the agenda of various groups. Go there to their meeting in their place and say, hi, this is presenting the Danville Mill site. This is what we do. This is kind of what all that stuff you said. This is what we need. This is how to get in touch with us. All those ideas you said are great. Why don't you come and check us out, or any questions or whatever. So that's another idea I thought. of doing that, getting on their agenda somehow, going to their meeting, and, you know, as you say, dragging.
Yeah, civic groups, religious groups, the local libraries,
And
yeah,
lost
like,
my pen. Yeah. Okay, I wouldn't have any more time. Thank you very much.
Thank
Okay.
you, Kathy. Okay.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks.
Bye.
It's been very helpful. Thank you.